Hello, my name is Tyler Jacinto. I'm taking a stance against Adrian Ramos on the topic of sweatshops. His major claim was that the clothing industry in the first world countries used for cheap labor are unethical. His secondary claims are that the conditions these people work in are strenuous, dangerous, and unethical, and families, including young children, work endless hours in harsh conditions to supply for themselves. I'd like to point out that he's making a bunch of value claims here on what is right and what's wrong, and not what the claim of fact speech is supposed to be on. And he also doesn't cite anything that he says, so there's no way to prove that he's right or wrong. So his first secondary claim is the condition of these people working are strenuous, dangerous, and unethical. So there's no evidence or citation in his argument, and it's based on value claims. And people all over the world work dangerous jobs. People die every day doing their job just to make money. And so in these third world countries, the next best thing is farming. So people may think that farming is a safer occupation, but it isn't. The International Labor Organization estimates that the agricultural worker suffers 250 million accidents every year, and says that in some countries the fatal accident rate is twice as common in agriculture as it is in industries. So working in sweatshops may be dangerous, but people, well, they're working there because it's a little bit safer. And sweatshops, yeah, they're safer than working in. And at the end of the day, people are going to do things for money. It's unfortunate that they have to live there, but it's their life. So his second claim is families, including young children, work endless hours in harsh conditions to supply for themselves. Again, Adrian does not include any citations, so I don't know where any of his evidence is coming from. It does appear that he makes a lot of value claims too. I'm not going to argue that families and young children work endless hours in these harsh conditions. It's kind of already a proven fact. So they work here to make money. In 9 out of 10 countries, working 10 hours a day in the apparel industry lists employment above and often far above the $2 a day threshold. And in half of these countries, it results in earning more than 3 times the national average. So this proves that sweatshops are not unfairly paying these people, and that they're actually making okay money in their country. And nearly half the world's population, more than 3 billion people, live on less than $2.50 a day. So more than 1.3 billion people live in extreme poverty, and that's $1.25 a day. So they're actually living better lives than those people in the whole entire world, and their lives could actually be worse. And children work in these sweatshops too. It's not a secret, so I'm not going to argue against that. And Adrian makes a claim about pregnant women working in sweatshops. There's a lot of information on there, and there's no citation, so I'm kind of just going to disregard it and not talk about it. So in conclusion, sweatshops do some good. They do work in dangerous conditions, but they could be working in worse conditions. They do work long and hard hours, but they are mostly paid more than $2 a day, and that often makes they often make 3 times more than the national average. So overall, I wouldn't blame the first world countries for exploiting their industries to third world countries. I just blame their governments for not stepping in and doing anything. Thank you.
All right, Tyler, I think you've got some good general claims about the advocate's argument, the lack of evidence, for instance, specifying some of the information that's being presented, and then a generic argument that suggests that there needs to be more context in order to understand the circumstances that people are functioning in. On the specificity of evidence, every time the advocate makes a claim and doesn't present any evidence to support that claim, I think it's perfectly justified on your part to point that out and suggest that there's no reason to assume that the claim is true or that it even needs to be responded to in this particular case. And by the way, if you can find a singular example that goes the opposite direction, you can almost automatically do the contrast and say, look, they provided no evidence. I've got an example here that shows you that this isn't true, so I'm not exactly sure why they believe this is true in comparison. And you do kind of acknowledge, look, the world's full of people that have to work hard. Sometimes they work in dangerous jobs and the circumstances are unpleasant. I think you went the right direction on this, suggesting that we need to look at the bigger context, and that is that the alternatives that they have are worse. The alternatives are, of course, starving to death, which I don't think you mentioned, but the other alternative is to work jobs that are even more difficult and problematic. And you mentioned farming as one of those potential jobs, and you had some statistical information that suggested that there are dangers there. Plus, you also mentioned that the notion that the pay that people are going to get for doing this work is extremely fair in the context of the places that they're living. It might not seem very significant to people living in first world country, that you're getting paid X amount of dollars a day, but when that is 2 or 3 times what the average family makes in those areas, then I think it puts it into a lot more context. The fairness argument, like you said, is in fact a value claim, and there are a couple of places where there are lots of value claims being presented in the argument, and you did a pretty good job trying to keep that in context. Again, you challenged the evidence on whether or not families and kids are doing these things, suggesting that there isn't really a lot of data, and then you kind of repeat the argument about farming as being a potential problem. Like I said, I think most of the stuff on that second point was very applicable to your argument, and it makes perfect sense. The context that you give at the end and the summary, I thought, worked pretty well. All right, thank you.